some people here in this room, and I'd like to see who in the audience is either currently serving or has served in the Utah legislature. Could you just stand for a minute, and we want to get your name and recognize you? Representative
Walt Brooks.
Walt Brooks is my representative here.
David Clark.
David Clark served in the Utah House of Representatives for 12 years and was the Speaker of the House before he ran for Congress.
True.
Thank you for being here. I just have to hand it to everybody. Oh, you were in, go ahead.
Chad Benyon, I was in the House of Representatives, former Chairman of Commerce and Revenue Appropriations.
Happy for him, right? So I'm Don Epson. I'm presently serving as Senator in District 29, and I serve as the Vice Chair of Executive Appropriations in the Senate.
Thank you. I have to tell you that I feel really relieved. I had to be in their seat 7 times running for a re-election, and it's not fun. In fact, I often said that when somebody signs up to run for public office, they are certifying that they are insane. Because I tell you, it is the most grueling thing emotionally and mentally in every way to fight for that seat and to try to accomplish the things that you wanted to get elected for. So we have the best system in America for nominating people for the ballot. No other state has clung to the delegate convention process that we have. And I believe with all my heart that it's the main reason that we are the best state for business and the best state for families, because of our process, because you delegates become the jury that weighs the candidates in the balance. And sometimes that's uncomfortable because, for a lot of different reasons. But that's what these folks are willing to do, is to be held in the balance. And so we would ask you to remember Ronald Reagan today as we have this debate and show respect. We would ask you to not cheer or boo or clap or anything during the debate, but at the end we can thank them for their work, because we don't want the audience to be trying to sway opinion by the noise of the audience. We want you to hold these candidates for what their principles are that they are advocating for. And we would just ask that kind of decorum so that we can have a very fair process here today. And remember the fairness that Ronald Reagan gave when he said the 11th commandment, that we should respect everybody within our party, because our party is what has made this nation great since Ronald Reagan. We're going to start with some questions. At first, let me see, where is Haley? Okay, you have the cards. Let's make sure that
They're on the chairs if you need one. I can give one to you.
okay, and your timer card.
It's right here. I'll hold them up in the back so the...
Okay.
Howard, the pens don't write.
I have a pen to wax the nub off. Take the nub off the tip.
The people we didn't want questions from, their pens didn't work.
We pre-designed the pens not to work.
So actually, we
Made in
didn't furnish the
California.
pens,
This
so
sounds like a tactic.
just be conscious of that. We still have 4 chairs up here and 1 chair right here, so we'd like people to be comfortable. Chairs over here as well. So Haley is going to hold up the cards. Can you show us what you're going to hold up at what time?
1 minute's green, 30 seconds is orange, and yellow is time's up. Sorry, I have red, so.
So I'm not sure my eyes can see those very well. Can
See the
candidates?
colors.
You know colors.
No,
Yellow
I'm fine.
means you're done. That's the message.
Okay. So we're going to have 2 minutes for these first line of questions, and we'll start alphabetically with Benyon, then Green, then Ibsen. And then we'll rotate each time, and the next question will start with the next person, so that you each get to be first on one question or the other. And then we'll have 1 minute rebuttal or further comment or enhancement. And if you mention one of your opponents in your rebuttal, we're going to give that person another 15 seconds, just so that everything is fair and everybody gets to respond to anything said about them. So, gentlemen, start your engines. Why on earth would you put yourself through this? What is it that's bringing you to want to go through this process to represent Washington County in the in the Utah State Senate?
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. You know, the big reason I'm running is because I've had so many people talk to me about representation. Representation matters. And when you have issues where 85% of your constituents want something one way and it goes another, well, that's not representation. And so these things matter. I think that standing out and fighting on issues, I had to fight a number of tough issues in my prior service before. I was the sponsor of the Voluntary Contributions Act, which with some individuals made me the most unpopular person in the state because we were ending the process of political contributions being collected through the state process, through taxes, and I ran that to end that. The biggest thing that a senator or representative can do is represent their constituents. And that's why I'm running to represent you.
Yes.
Please, no applause.
That's right.
My name's Corey Green. I'm running because I'm not a career politician, so I got a lot of energy and I'm motivated to be here. I'll take bullets or whatever needs to be, you know, ready to run. I'm not a career politician. I'm here to help our state because I think our state is under a good versus evil attack, a woke versus unwoke attack. I think our Constitution is under attack right now. And I want to run to be able to better my children's lives. I want to run, and I am running, because I think there needs to be some changes in this state that would be beneficial to our families, beneficial to business owners, and beneficial to our children who want to stay here in Washington County instead of having to move because they can't afford to be here. I want to help bring jobs here. But I really think that we need a constitutional representation. That's why I'm running. If I can't reconcile a bill with the United States Constitution or the Utah Constitution as a legislative member, I will not vote yes on it. So, thank you.
First of all, I want to thank all of you for being here on a Saturday. I think Saturdays are pretty sacred to us and our families, and I appreciate you being here to listen to us. I want to run again because I believe that I've been a very good representative for Washington County. There's never been a bill that I've ever voted on that there was 85% that didn't want it. I will tell you that my position on executive appropriations, I've been able to accomplish some great things for highway infrastructure, for our airports, for arts, for all number of things that we've needed in this city, in this county, and southern Utah in general. At the university, we've got buildings and land purchases that's come under my stewardship as a budget chair. And I feel like I want to run again one more time to bring that seniority and that seat of leadership back to Washington County again.
Thank you. So, do you feel a need for rebuttal on your introduction, or should we go to the next question?
I'm okay with the next question.
Fine. Great. So, one of the things that the Republican Party stands for, both nationally and here in Utah, is for a strong belief in the proper role of limited government. So, do you agree with that? And what role does the Utah legislature, and particularly the Utah Senate that you are wanting to serve in, what role does that legislature and Senate have in preserving our liberties and our individual freedoms? Mr. Green.
I think that government should be limited. The Constitution demands that the government is limited. It's like Federalist 51 says, if we were angels, we wouldn't need government. That's not the case. Government's here for a reason. I believe that the federal government has no business in Utah lands. I believe the federal government has no business in our kids' education. I believe the federal government continues to overstep its boundaries with our constitutional rights, with FISA, for an example, at the federal level. And I think that we need to be sure as a state that we stand up for this type of stuff, that we support not only our local leaders and our local legislature, but we support our senators like Mike Lee who stand up for these types of rights. And that's why I'm running, and that's what I intend to do, is to stand up for the Constitution and these rights. The federal government is too big. The state government, in my opinion, is too big. There are things that we can cut in this state. There are some agencies that could use more help, but that's where I stand on this. And as a senator, I think the most important thing would be to listen to the people in the district and communicate with the people in the district on a consistent basis. It's your seat. It's not my seat. It's not Benion's seat. It's not Ipsen's seat. That seat belongs to we the people. Thank you.
You know, I had a delegate send me a questionnaire a few hours ago and asked me when the last time I read the Utah Constitution. It was kind of eye-opening for me, so I went and it'd been some time. In the last year I'd read it, but I went back and kind of rebriefed myself. And you know, one of the promptings, one of the things I felt as I read the responsibilities of government, is I felt pretty good about the things that our state legislature is doing to manage people's rights and constitutional rights. You know, in this last session, we ran a couple of bills that did away with commissions and oversight groups within the state. I think we're working towards making that better. Utah is by far and away, 16 years running, been the best managed state in the nation. I think that comes because we manage people's rights, we manage our money, and we do the things that need to be done that people can't do. And I'm honored to be part of that.
When I was in the House, I had Greg Burton from the Tribune come up to me and ask a question. Now, back in those days, the press was down on the House floor, and in my second term, my desk was right next to the press. Not the most enviable position to be in. But he asked me if I'd seen the Senate Supplemental Appropriations Act, and I said, no, I hadn't. And I looked at it, and the first item was deer crossings, Washington County, for I-15 for deer to get through, 1.5 million each. Okay, see that. Next item was for a golf course in a municipality. And I thought, But then I got to the third one, which said Dinosaur Park, Ogden City. And I thought, oh, Greg, I got it. This is nothing more than a little Jurassic Park. You know, I've got a proven track record too as a fiscal conservative from when I was in the House. And the process right now, as I've observed over the last many years, we've gotten away from really being fiscal conservatives. You know, I was trying to think, when did we get to the point where stadiums are a government necessity to fund? Now, as I go back and look on the things that have happened, one of the things I see that's a big change, my former Senate co-chairs with me, Scott Jenkins and Carleen Walker, one thing we would do is when people would come to testify, we would swear them in. I think that's one thing that needs to happen again to get good testimony. But one other thing that's happened that needs to be changed, the public needs to be able to give testimony in these appropriations processes, because the appropriations committees have become nothing more than echo chambers for the agencies. That needs to change. That legislators aren't going to make good decisions without good input, and it needs to come from everyone. Thank you.
Okay, 1 minute of response from each of you. Go ahead, Mr. Green.
I agree that there's a lot of wasteful spending in this state. We the people should not be responsible to pay for sports stadiums. We the people here in District 29 in St. George shouldn't be responsible for $15 million of a transit station up in Draper. That's my opinion. Things can be run differently. We need to cut spending and get serious about it. Yeah, our state's fairly managed decently compared to other states, but there's more that we can do and more that can be done.
Senator. Chad, do you want to? I'm good. Thank you. Okay, this next question I'm going to, it's about the PC kind of things that are going on in our society today, what the left is doing to try to change men and women and the equity, the DEI. There was a bill passed in Utah this session, House Bill 261. By the way, if you ever want to look at these bills, you can bring up your phone and put in le.utah.gov. The very first thing that will come up is this sheet where you can put in SB 261. It will bring it up, it will show the vote, all of that, if you're interested in doing that. But HB 261 prohibits an institution of higher education and public education and a government employer from engaging in discriminatory practices through enforcement of DEI and the kinds of things where you choose a minority because you think the minority needs to have a extra credit or vice versa. And so our legislature passed that on party lines, by the way. We also passed House Bill 257, which establishes a standard regarding distinctions on the basis of sex and applies the standard in certain facilities and opportunities where designations on the basis of sex address individual privacy, bullying, and women's opportunities, including women's sports. So the Utah legislature passed that on party lines. And the third bill, Utah is the first state to ban gender reassignment surgery for minors. That is Senate Bill 16, sponsored by Dr. Kennedy, who's now running for Congress up in his area. So the question is, if you disagree with what the legislature did there, or if you agree with it, how do you explain to somebody who's a proponent of DEI, who's a proponent of gender reassignment, that the legislature should control that for minors instead of parents and instead of the doctors that those parents trust to help make that decision for their minor child. Senator Anderson.
Well, first of all, I agree with all three of them. I voted for all three of them. And I will tell you that a woman is a biological female, nothing different, should never change from that. I believe that we need to protect our children. If our parents, and I realize that's a fine line that the government get involved in our families. But if you've got someone who wants to take a minor child, especially a young minor child, and subject them to surgery to change their behavior, their sex, or whatever, we have no business there. That the doctors have no business practicing that. And I will tell you, the DEI is absolutely taken out of our universities, it's taken out of our public businesses, and it can't be taken forth, and I'm glad we did that.
I agree with those bills. I believe that there are two genders, male, female. I look at it from the standpoint too of having been in sports as a collegiate athlete, and I see what's happening right now with the transgender movement is completely undermining women's sports, destroying it actually. Yet, where are all the feminists? Where is NOW? Where are any of the women's groups? Okay. With regards to these things are going to continue. They're not going to change, and there is a role for the state to protect minors. We do it all the time with different legislation. That has to occur because you can't vote till you're 18, right? Can't drink till later. Why on earth would we allow anyone to do any type of surgery on minors that would have a lifelong impact? Now, if somebody, when they're an adult, wants to make those decisions, that's another thing. But children should be able to enjoy their childhood and get to adulthood without these political issues.
These two gentlemen summed it up pretty good. I agree with all three bills. I believe that a naturally born woman is a woman, naturally born man is a man. There's nothing in between. People that have those beliefs, yeah, they're still people. We should still care about them. We should still help them. We should still be supportive of them. But I would never sponsor a bill that would go against like these three bills here. I fully believe that this is part of the good versus evil war that we're facing on this planet, and that's where I stand on it.
Any follow-up?
Actually, I would, Senator. You know, on our Supreme Court building, it reads equal justice under law. Now, regardless of what your views are, you are protected under the law. So if you want to believe a certain way, you can, as long as it doesn't impact anyone else's rights. But that's what the standard should be in the law, and the equality and the rights equal for every citizen in this nation.
Anyone else? Okay, so we're going to have questions from the audience, and we would ask you, is there somebody who's going to pick those up? Okay, so, and if you have other questions during, please. So we're taking questions related to what the powers of the Utah legislature and the state senate, the roles that these folks would play. So I hope your questions are relative to that and not to Hamas or to, you know, because those are important issues too. But the Utah legislature doesn't have any control over those. And so you have one there too? Okay. All right. And we're going to go through as many of these as we can. But first, we want the lightning round. So these are questions that can just be answered with a yes or a no or undecided, I need to study further or whatever. Do you support the Utah Fits All Scholarship, which provides $8,000 for parents to send their children to the private school of their choice. Yes or no?
I'm a yes.
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 Okay. Currently, the Utah Fits All Scholarship funds only 1,200 students. Now, we have 700,000 K-12 students in this state. So that's, I think, less than 1%, if my math is correct. So the legislature is going to be asked over the years ahead, and one of you will be in the Senate to help vote on that. Do you support ending the waiting list for these scholarships and expanding the program to more students? Mr. Green.
Yes, as long as it doesn't include illegal alien children.
Okay.
Yeah, we put more money into that this legislative session to expand that. And yeah, I am in favor of expanding.
Can everybody hear?
We put more money in it in this last legislative session, and I'm in favor of expanding it.
Okay. Well, let's ask each of you to
Yeah.
stand for to answer and shout as loud as you
Okay.
can.
I'm a yes too, and I think we need to increase it over time. The control needs to stay with parents in making the determinations in their children's education.
Okay.
So the control needs to stay with the parents to a point. We need to make sure the parents aren't just taking the money and they have results by testing for their children that are, if they happen to be homeschooling them, or if the other plans they're on have to be valid. I don't want to just put it into a willy-nilly program. It has to be one that's effective.
And I just say, of course, that's the way it has to be. There has to be certain standards.
Mr. Green.
I agree.
On the November ballot, this November, voters will decide the fate of a constitutional amendment, SJR 10, which was passed in the 2023 session to remove the limitations on the use of individual and corporate income taxes, which are currently limited to funding public education, higher education, and certain children's funding issues. The amendment would also trigger the removal of the sales tax on food. Do you support that constitutional amendment? By the way, constitutional amendments have to be passed unlike California, where a constitutional amendment can be put through an initiative process and go directly on the ballot. In Utah, the Constitution requires that to amend it, you need 2/3 vote of each house and then a vote of the people, a majority vote of the people. So,
Yes, I am in favor of it.
I'm in favor of the bill also, particularly removing the food tax, but I think the one thing that we should be doing too is looking at the overall tax structure and making adjustments, because why do we keep giving one another tax refunds, reductions? If we're setting the rate right the first time, people don't have to get refunds, reductions.
One of the things though, in the last 4 years, the legislature has made tax cuts, goes right to your pocket, that amount to $1.3 billion in the last 4 sessions.
No, not at all.
Mr.
I support it.
Not for
Okay.
people like us.
Mr. Green supports that amendment as well. So, related to what Senator Ipsen just said, in for 16 years, Dr. Arthur Laffer's team has conducted an annual analysis of state economic competitiveness of all 50 states using 15 policy factors that legislators affect. Utah ranked #1 at best economic outlook all 16 years. Laffer and other conservative economists have urged states to get rid of the state income tax, saying it is a hindrance to economic growth. Consequently, the Utah legislature has reduced the state's individual and corporate income taxes from what was 7.2% to 5%, and each year, as Senator Ipsen mentioned, it has reduced the rate again to the current rate in this recent session to 4.55%. The goal is to keep reducing the income tax. Would you support the continued reduction of the income tax rate, and would you agree to ultimately seek to remove the income tax?
Just print money. Why wouldn't
I think I'm gonna go back to what I just said a few moments ago. I think we need to take a comprehensive look at the tax structure, and because we have certain constitutional functions that we are required to fund, whether it be public safety, education, general welfare. We've got roads that we need for commerce, but we need to be judicious about how we do it and fiscally responsible. But that's why too, as we examine the tax structure, we look at the income tax. But if you buy your property and you're continuing to pay taxes on it every year, do you ever really own your property?
not.
Or does the government have the ability to come back at some time and take it from you?
That is not private property.
So what I think we need to do is really look comprehensively at the entire tax structure, look at what our expenditures are, our constitutionally required duties, and come up with a better plan than the form we have with just doing reductions in certain areas.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you.
I agree with lowering income tax. I'd like to see some things differently with the state of Utah bringing in more money. I really like a bill that Representative Kara Birkeland sponsored this last session to bring the lottery to Utah. There's a lot of states that use lottery funds for funding different things that can lower taxes. I support doing all we can to lower taxes, and especially the income tax. Like Chad said, there is things that we need to fund: public safety, school teachers, roads, everything. So we need to figure out how to pay for those things as we cut taxes. So,
You know, taxing on income is a tax on productivity, and that is counterproductive to making it work. But you've got to, the comprehensive thing if you're gonna eliminate income tax, you're gonna have to replace that because there are essential services, just like these guys have said. The Constitution mandates education for our students. We have roads that need to be upkeep. You know, it's interesting, interesting nuance that, have you noticed the new black license plates that you see on cars? There was actually from those license plates, there was actually in that fund, there was actually $1 million raised that we looked at, or if we could move that around someplace when we were studying the budget. We wound up not doing it, but it something that simple created $1 million. Now that's kind of decimal dust in a $29 million budget. But in order to do away with income tax, which I believe is counterproductive to our economy, you've got to replace it with something. We don't want higher property tax. Let's talk about that. Sales tax, you go to some states, it's 10%. We go crazy. We bought a car, we had to pay 10% of that cost on the car. So where do we do it? It's going to take a comprehensive study to make that work.
Thank you. Any rebuttal response? Okay, the next question is related to property taxes. In 1985, Utah enacted the Truth in Taxation Law.
Who did that?
I was with the Taxpayers Association, and we initiated that. And frankly, Tax Commissioner Gary Cornea, a property tax expert, who's now, I think he's teaching at our university here, and I know he lives here. He was the person who gave it credibility, and the legislature supported this truth in taxation law. It makes local elected officials go through some grief every time they propose a property tax hike. There has to be a notice on your property assessment that you get in June. There is printed that those entities that are proposing to increase your property tax, the amount, the impact on your property, and the date and time of the hearing, where sometimes 2,000 people have showed up with pitchforks and hanging ropes and torches to let their elected officials know that we're not going to stand for this property tax hike. As a result of that, in 1985, Utah was the 24th highest property tax state. Now, after that many years of this law making it hard for elected officials to increase property taxes, we are 38th. And on homes, we're 43rd. There's only 7 states that are lower home property tax than Utah. And it's because the legislature hasn't given in to pressure by elected officials to ease the pressure of the notice and public hearing, and also to build in an automatic inflationary rate that is not called a tax increase. So, what is your, I know this is a lightning round, and maybe you can each just say I support it or not, but what is your position on protecting Utah's truth in taxation law?
I do. I support us keeping that law in place.
I support us keeping the law in place, but I'd like to see a couple of small amendments, like maybe making the print larger on when the notices go out, because it's so dinky. I had a delegate bring me their copy, and it was so small. I'm certain a lot of folks missed it.
Yeah.
There's got to be some things happen so that notice is better.
I support it.
Okay, all the candidates support keeping that law and not letting local officials try to get the legislature to build inflation into that rate. And there's a lot of pressure, because locally elected officials were elected too, and they've got pressures in their budget, and so when they come up to state senators, they say, won't you help us out here? We can't, but you know, they can, it doesn't prevent them from increasing
Right.
property
There's no
taxes
need.
at all.
They just
It
don't
just
wanna
says
have to
they
own
have
up
to
to
take
it.
the heat
Yep.
through a public notice and a public meeting where people can show up and voice their concern.
Howard.
Okay, we're switching to HJR 14 was proposed this session to establish a 60% threshold for the passage of any statewide initiative that would raise taxes. It didn't get considered in both houses, and it will require a 2/3 vote of each house to place a constitutional amendment that says no initiative can pass that increases taxes unless you get 60% of the voters to agree with it. What is your position that's likely to come before you if you're elected?
I'm thinking on that. I like that the public has the determination, whether or not it's that threshold or whether or not it's, if we're gonna keep everything 2/3, make it 66%. But I don't have a problem at all with the concept.
I agree with that. However, 60% threshold on a public initiative, I kind of question. 51%, anything over 50, I'd be great with. I think would be appropriate.
But you wouldn't support the 60% high threshold?
I would if it was the standard that they had set, and I was to vote on that and didn't have any other option to change that.
You gotta stand up. So
Sorry. Yeah, I'd support 60. If that was the bill coming through, I'd support 60. So,
I support it, and one of the things we have to be really careful, gotta remember that we live in a republic. You elect officials to make your laws. When initiatives are passed, they're never vetted. They may very well be drawn up by one person, who his idea is king, and we don't live in a democracy. We live in a republic, and it's important that the laws that we live by are passed. We could become California. They do everything by initiative and referendum. That doesn't make any sense. Yes, I would support it.
You know, I went to school in Oregon, got a scholarship at the University of Oregon track, and you could almost sneeze and get a referendum up there. It was that easy. I don't support having a low threshold for referendums, but I think what needs to happen is there needs to be a standard. It needs to be set and not change when there's an initiative, a referendum that passes from the public, and the legislature goes back and then just makes the process harder, changes it, makes it more difficult going forward. We need to just get it finalized and set and let it be.
That's exactly what happened.
We need digital signatures
Any other?
Yeah.
on their voter law.
Okay, here's the first question from the public. This is a really good question.
Well, if
You
trust-
support limited federal government
You have to
and
register
oppose
on your
federal overreach.
If you don't trust that,
What
then you don't
about the
trust anything.
state's overreach
So I
on
wouldn't
local
even vote
governments
for referendum to change
in
on my own login.
design requirements for developments,
I already know you're
et
a
cetera?
registered voter.
And I would say too, I would add to that question, the legislature does not allow local governments to impose an income tax, for example. They do not allow them carte blanche in impact fees and those kinds of things. Isn't it the same thing, or is it different that we say the federal government shouldn't tell us what to do, so why should the legislature tell the local entities what to do? What is your response to that, Mr. Green?
my response to that is I'd have to look at it on a case-by-case basis, look at it and make an evaluation on that, and would have to do more research on that type of an issue.
Okay.
So.
You know, we all get mad at federal overreach, and it fires me up quicker than anything there is. The best government is the government closest to the people, and that's the way it needs to be. There are some things that the state needs to have oversight over. You mentioned the permitting process. There's some frustration with people that some of the cities and municipalities take too long, they're too restrictive. We need to make sure that we fix that at home so that the state doesn't have to get into that business.
You know, there's a little bit of a difference, and I agree. I'd be one who says I hate federal overreach, whether it's what's on the SR 247 road right-of-ways, whether it's the grazing, whatever it is. But there's a difference between that issue and with the states, because all of our cities, towns, water districts, whatever we have, those are all political subdivisions of the state. And so we need to keep that in mind and work together, and I agree, the government that's closest to the people is the best and the most responsive. But just because it's local doesn't mean you should be able to run wild either. And so there's that balance, but that's a huge distinction between federally what's happening and in the state of Utah.
Any other? Okay, so another question from the audience. We've seen a lot of shootings happening in America on a daily basis across many communities. Thank heaven we don't have that kind of thing at this moment in Utah. A lot of people are calling for ban on certain kinds of weapons. such as assault weapons. The state legislature can play a role in controlling gun rights and that kind of thing, although they may run afoul of the Second Amendment. What is your position specifically on banning assault weapons and, in general, dealing with the issue of guns being misused?
So an assault rifle is simply a hunting rifle in a different configuration. I absolutely am opposed to banning them. Guns don't kill people, people kill people, and we just don't need to go there. You know, we passed this year House Bill 84, which I was a Senate sponsor, that dealt with school safety, dealt with guns in schools. We also had House Bill 14, which dealt with hoax call-ins of shootings in schools. We had one in the spring last year in Weber County and also in Washington County. But the one in Weber County, they figure cost over $1 million. That call-in, because the hospitals shut down their operations. They didn't do any that day because they prepared their emergency rooms and emergency surgery to be able to deal with the carnage that was going to come in, and it was all a hoax. So I am absolutely opposed to anything, however, that has to do with our Second Amendment rights.